Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm so happy you're here. Today I want to talk about freehanding. So this is actually going to be a 2-video series. In this first video, I'm going to be covering all of the things that you need to know before you start knitting. And then in the video that I'm going to be posting next Friday, I'll be sharing some of the basic knitting techniques that you need to know in order to make your own clothes. So I'm a huge fan of freehanding. Sometimes you just get an idea for a design that there isn't a pattern for. Maybe you want to experiment with a new technique that you learned, or maybe you're like me and you saw a really cute knitwear piece at the store and the thought pops into your head like, yeah, I could make that. I feel like freehanding opens the door for creativity, and with a little knowledge of the basics, you too can make your own clothes. So I realized that I need to establish a little bit of credibility when it comes to freehanding. So I wanted to show you a couple of pieces that I've freehanded recently. This first one is a knit cami. She's super cute. It's inside out. This next piece is an open knit off the shoulder sweater. I made it by knitting up a bunch of panels in stockinette stitch and sewing them together. And then I have this beautiful knit tank top. She's super flowy. Someone actually just bought this on my Etsy. I'm so happy to send it to them. Isn't she gorge? Like I mentioned in the beginning, in this video, I want to walk you through the design planning stage, so let's get into it. Firstly, I want to talk about why planning is so important. Let's imagine our knitwear as a cake. Even if you've baked a cake before, if you get an idea for a new cake, you're probably not just going to throw a bunch of ingredients together and hope it turns out the way that you wanted it to. That being said, if you have a lot of experience, you can probably freestyle to your heart's content. But even then, a little bit of planning at the beginning will save you from a lot of frogging down the line. Also, let's say that you have your finished piece and it doesn't quite fit the way that you wanted it to, or there's something wrong with it. You can revisit your design notes, see where it went wrong, and then make the necessary adjustments. So what I usually do first is make a sketch of my design and ask myself these essential questions. Number 1, am I going to be knitting panels, knitting in the round, or knitting some combination of the two? Number 2, how do I want the piece to fit? Is it going to be cropped or long, fitted or oversized? Number 3, what yarn and needle size combination am I going to be using? I rarely use the recommended needle size that comes with the yarn, but that's because I love to experiment with different yarn weight and needle size combinations. It's important to know that every yarn has its own unique personality, which is going to affect how your finished piece turns out. I recommend making some gauge swatches beforehand so that you can get a better idea of how a piece knitted up with that particular yarn weight and needle size combo is going to fit and feel. So I wanted to give you some examples of what I'm talking about when I say every yarn has its own personality. These first 2 swatches were knit using the same yarn. This is Lucky Brand's new bamboo yarn. This was knitted with 4mm needles, which was the recommended size, and this was knitted with 8mm needles, which has created this really pretty sort of meshy texture. This is Malabrigo Rios, my absolute favorite yarn. This swatch was knitted with 4.5mm needles, which are again the recommended needle size. And this is a swatch made with 8mm needles. This is a swatch of cotton from Juniper Moon Farms. It's really beautiful, really soft, and this is knit with 4.5mm needles. This is the same yarn, but knit with 8mm needles. And then lastly, I have a swatch of Lily's Sugar and Cream. This was knit with 4.5mm needles, and this was knit with 8mm needles. Even just looking at the swatches, you can probably already see some of the differences between the yarns. I think the most glaring difference is between the swatches of Malabrigo and Lily's Sugar and Cream. These are both 10x10 swatches knit with 4.5mm needles, and they're completely different sizes. Comparing the two cottons, the Juniper Moon Farms one is super airy and light, while the Sugar and Cream swatch is very thick and structured. Let's also take a look at the stretch of the different fibers. Starting with the bamboo, it's very drapey, it has a great stretch, and it also holds the stretch when you stretch it out. Looking at the Malabrigo Rios, which is a 100% wool yarn, it has a lot of good stretch, but it likes to bounce back. It doesn't hold the stretch as much as the bamboo yarn. Now the cotton, also very stretchy, holds the stretch. The same with this, stretchy, holds the stretch. However, I think this cotton has a lot more drape potential compared to this Sugar and Cream. In the end, choosing your yarn really comes down to your own preferences and vision for your piece. I think bamboo and cotton are really beautiful fibers for summer, though I would probably stay away from the thicker, more coarse cotton. Also, I don't know if this is controversial, but I knit with wool all months out of the year. I feel like there are plenty of wool yarns out there that offer a lot of breathability and comfort even for the summer months. The last question I always ask myself is, how much yarn do I have, or how much yarn am I going to need to knit up this project? It can sometimes be hard to guesstimate, but I still like to do it because nobody likes to lose yarn chicken. The next step of the planning stage is taking your own measurements. So if you're planning on freehanding a lot of tops, these are the measurements that I recommend you always have on hand. The length of your torso, the length from your wrist to your shoulder, the length from your shoulder to your armpit, the circumference of your bust, the circumference of your waist, and the circumference of your bicep. Just write these down somewhere so that you don't have to measure yourself every time you want to make a new top. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this video are the tools that I find really helpful for freehanding. The first one, of course, being my little measuring tape. I cannot live without this. And you just definitely need one if you're planning on making clothes that are fitted to your body. The next one is a row counter. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've knitted something super uneven because I didn't count my rows properly, and this just saved me. If you don't have them already, you're probably going to want to get some stitch markers. If you don't want to buy them, you can just make your own by tying little loops of yarn together. They're definitely helpful for keeping track of what you're doing as you're knitting, especially when you're freehanding. The last thing is a set of interchangeable needles. These are the Clover Takumi interchangeable needles. Now, I know that sets of interchangeable needles are pretty expensive. I will say that I've saved myself a lot of money in the long run by buying this set instead of going to Michael's every time I wanted to try out a new needle size. Interchangeables are also great because you have the option of knitting in the round or knitting panels, so you don't have to buy straight needles either. That's all I have for this video on the planning stage. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss my next video, in which I will be covering the basic knitting techniques that you need to know in order to freehand your own clothes. Thank you for watching. If there's something that you feel like I've missed, be sure to comment so that I can cover it in the next video. Consider giving me a like if you're feeling generous today, and if not, I'll see you next time. I love you. Bye.